AMI, metering, and the demand responses, and have been heavily involved in the accelerating standards for smart grid interoperabilities. Uh, Robbie, sir.
Yes, thank you so much. Shall I begin?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Sure.
So first off, thank you so much for the kind introductions and also for the invitation to speak. I'm quite honored, and I hope you will find some inspiration and knowledge from the information I share today. So let me share my slides. Here we are. I think I can make those full screen. Everyone, can someone verify that you can see the slides before I begin?
Yes, sir, it is perfectly visible.
Very much visible.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So the topic I would like to speak on today is the importance of standards and particularly engagement in standards development to career growth. I believe that there are a number of benefits that aren't necessarily obvious when you become active in the standards development process, regardless if you're an industry participant or coming from academia, a student. There are benefits to everyone for engagement in the standards development process. Some background about myself: as you heard, I work for GE's Grid Solutions business. I'm also a member of the Board of Governors for IEEE's Standard Association. So I've been very much engaged in standards throughout my career, and I'm hoping to share some of those benefits with you and encourage you all to engage there as well. So I'm going to just dive right into some high level. Here's where I think there's some major benefits to participating in standards. You'll see there on the side, I think standards represent an interesting area where a number of skills are needed, particularly skills that are not skills that engineers get to use very often. We as engineers are often focused on the technical work, but when you participate in standards development, not only do you have to have a deep technical knowledge, there's a lot of people skills that are involved as well, because you're going to be debating with other people what is the right technical approach, eventually voting and things like that. So it's almost, it becomes a very interesting intersection of technical knowledge, people skills, and eventually leadership experience as well, that may not even be directly related to your day-to-day job. So one of the first benefits to standards participation that I try to stress quite a lot, because it's one of these kind of soft benefits, if you will, is the interaction with experts from across industry. In essence, expanding your personal network of industry contacts. I'm ever amazed at how small an industry can actually be. Taking my own experience as an example, I work in grid modernization or the smart grid industry, and having participated in standards development for several years now, I'm just ever amazed at how I see the same people over and over again. They may switch jobs, they may switch companies, they may go from academia to industry or from industry to academia, but it's often the same small group of people. And it's a lot of people I've grown to know over the years through my standards participation. And in fact, in many cases have become true friends with these people. So getting to know participants from across the industry is quite important. And sometimes if you're in an industry like mine, you'll be interacting with customers. So you end up developing a good relationship that's a little different than the typical relationship with a customer. Often when you interact with a customer as an industry person, you're trying to sell them something, or you're trying to fix a problem they may have, or things like that. When you interact with customers in a standards development process, you really get to know what their actual needs are, and they also get to know you as a technical expert that's working on something that may not be directly related to an exact need that they have. So you begin to develop some trust there, and a relationship there that's built a little stronger than just purely a vendor to customer relationship, for example. You also develop relationships with other vendors, which can provide advantages down the road. It may be that you encounter issues when your company and their company are trying to work together on a customer project, or put together a solution for a customer. Or it may be, you're looking for a new job or a new industry to get into, and these contacts can really come in handy. So I put this first in the list of a benefit for standards participation, particularly to your career, because it's hard to quantify, but I believe this is actually the most important and the most beneficial aspect to engaging in standards and standards development. And I would strongly stress that that you consider that. Next is a better understanding of the depth of the technology. I think most people here are engineers. We all have very in-depth knowledge of technology, but it's interesting to get engaged in standards development because you start to hear more cutting edge and interesting uses of technology, and kind of the latest and greatest. And I know that often standards are considered lagging behind the market. The market may come up with a new idea and then it gets standardized. But often the standards that are undeveloped, that are in development, tend to focus on technologies with the most change. So it's a great way to keep up with the latest in technology development. And by being engaged, you also, speaking as someone from industry, you have a time to market advantage. You understand what's coming and what's out there a little bit before your competitors who may not be engaged. And so you have that time to market advantage, which leads me to the next point: increasing your market intelligence, really getting to know what's going on in your industry, what's going on with the technology in your industry. You get insights on future requirements. I personally work in the power and energy space, and power and energy is often heavily regulated. So you'll have the utilities will often require standards for compliance. And so you get insights into the future standards that are coming and the requirements that may be placed on you in the future. You also get perspectives from across the world. IEEE standards, as well as many other standards, are international in nature. And we can often, all of us can often be very focused on the requirements and the perspective from our own local area, but it really helps to understand what's going on across the world and develop solutions that are applicable around the world. I know for myself personally, participation has really helped me to better understand even business differences in different regions. Being in the power and energy space, so once again, the regulations may lead to entirely different business models. In some areas, you have vertically integrated utilities that the utility will own the generation, will own the transmission, the distribution, and the relationship with the customer. In other areas, they may separate those. And some places they're even deregulated where you can have competition. And then there become new players like market aggregators and things like this. And really, I live in a place where I have a vertically integrated utility. So a lot of this was new to me, and I wouldn't have learned nearly as much about these different perspectives were I not engaged in standards development and hear the requirements from these different areas and hear the issues that other regions are facing, hear them directly from those people. And then I mentioned the time to market advantage for standards-based products. As you see these standards get close to finishing, you have an advantage of being able to create a product that complies with that standard the minute it's ready. Or if you're in academia, you have the ability to study a standard, to study its impacts, to write papers and things of that nature well before anyone else is aware that such a standard is coming out. The next area I'd like to touch on is deepening your knowledge of intellectual property impacts. I know when I was in school, for instance, I don't know that we learned very much about intellectual property, and particularly the impacts. And by intellectual property, I mean things like patents and the impacts they have on technologies and markets in general. And participation in standards starts to show you that the impacts of intellectual property, because sometimes there may be areas that are patented that a standard might touch on. And you really start to kind of need to understand and begin to understand the pros and cons, because in some cases it's good to have patents in areas, in other cases it might be considered bad, and it becomes an important skill for engineers. You come to understand the various licensing rules, disclosure policies, all of these things that, frankly, when I first started participating in standards, I had very little knowledge of. But have aided me in my career, and have even aided me in understanding when should I file for a patent, what can be patentable, and things like that. And then lastly, once you're engaged in the standards process and people begin to know you a little bit, you can gain some real leadership experience. Chairing standards, I usually recommend that people who are first getting involved in standards, as soon as you can, volunteer to be the secretary. It's actually a great role. You become a leader in the group, and then you also are very much aware of everything that's kind of going on, because you're the secretary, you're recording everything. You get a good grasp of getting to know everyone that's involved, because you have to record their attendance, and you start to really meet people that way. So I often encourage folks who are just starting in standards to volunteer to be a secretary, or just even for one meeting, volunteer to take the minutes. And then once you start to gain that leadership experience, you can become a vice chair, a chair, and really grow your career that way. And I should note that leadership in a standard is very different than leadership, say, in a company. In a company, if you're a manager, you have people that report to you. And you're their manager, and they have a lot of incentive to do what you say. Whereas in standards, everyone is a volunteer. No one works for anyone else. No one is anyone else's manager. So you have to learn good leadership skills to be able to lead a group of volunteers. It's kind of a soft skill that you learn on how to motivate people and how to have people create outcomes when you're not their boss, when you're not their manager. You may be the chair of a working group, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do what you say, if you will. And so you learn how to get people to do what you want, and work with people in a volunteer scenario. It also demonstrates thought leadership. When you're engaged in these standards, if you are looking for a new job, or if your customers see you engaged in standards, people start to view you as a thought leader, as someone that's out there in industry and really starts to understand the problems, and that you will have that better insight into the technology and the market and the developments in the market. So these are a number of, I really wanted to start the talk off with a number of the benefits to your career for participating in standards. I think the next question then is, well, okay, that's great, but how do I get involved? And since this is an IEEE meeting, I'm going to focus on how do you get involved in IEEE standards. But of course, if there are any questions later about getting involved in other standards bodies or anything like that, I'm happy to go into those as well. Let's see. Next slide. So these are the slides from particularly on getting into the IEEE Standards Association and some of what IEEE offers from a standards perspective. So you're probably already aware of what IEEE is. This is an IEEE venue, but just as an overview, there are over 420,000 members of IEEE now. It is the world's largest technical professional organization. And that means a lot. I go all over the world. I meet other IEEE members, and it breaks down barriers and makes it easy to find networks and to meet new people. IEEE has membership in over 160 countries, virtually every country in the world. There are 46 technical societies and councils, so that's just how IEEE is divided up. I personally am very active in the Communication Society and the Power and Energy Society, but there are a number of different societies, and each one of those societies has a means of getting engaged in standards and has standards activities. There are over 1,900 annual conferences, so multiple conferences going on, usually any given day. Over 5 million technical documents. Many of those are academic papers. Some of those are standards. There's a whole lot of interesting publications that IEEE does. And then the global humanitarian efforts. There are some really good things that are going on because IEEE's mission is to, quote, advance technology for humanity. And so there's a real push, I witnessed this firsthand at the board level, to do things that aid humanity. So a lot of efforts for rural electrification. So for rural areas that don't have electricity, how do we, as a group, make that help improve that situation? Purifying water, all sorts of kind of technical approaches to making humanity better off. In terms of the organization, I won't get into this much at all, but of course, IEEE members are at the top. We then have IEEE has a board of directors, and under there is the Standards Association. The Standards Association helps the different societies and councils with creation of standards. Usually the societies and councils have their own standards working groups, but they follow rules and policies set forth by the Standards Association to be consistent and to have a level playing field. I won't get into this too much. This is just a typical boilerplate. These standards are meant to be market relevant. And so this is something I guess I should highlight about IEEE. IEEE standards are market driven. And what I mean by that is there's no group within IEEE sitting around saying, these are the standards we should create. The standards that are started in IEEE are started by members like you and I. If you have an idea and you think it would make a good standard, there's a process to go through to create that standard. So in other words, it's bottom up, it's market driven as opposed to kind of top down creation of standards. And they're consensus based. So there are rules in IEEE for how the voting occurs, to make sure you have balanced voting, to make sure that you don't have any kind of dominance of one party, and how all that takes place, how you gain voting rights, and all, because we want it to be a very democratic and fair consensus-based solution. And of course, the benefits, I think I've talked quite a lot about the benefits of standards, but at a higher level, not to your personal career, but just at a higher level, standards advance the global technologies that promote innovation, which is often not intuitive to folks. I know I've definitely heard people in the past say standards limit innovation because you have now this standard that tells you what you have to do. But in fact, it's often the opposite. They build a platform on which you can develop innovation. So think about the internet I think is a great example. Before the internet protocol IP was standardized, you had a lot of different competing protocols, which made all of these networks very different. And we would have never gotten the innovation of the Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and all of these innovations that have now been built on top of the internet, because we needed a stable, standardized platform on which to build those innovations. And so that's often what standards do, is they promote innovation by creating an interoperable or standardized platform on which to innovate. There's also a lot of standards that are specific to public health and safety and well-being. And then they, of course, contribute to a sustainable future. There's a tremendous amount of activity right now in IEEE on renewable energy standards and ways to reduce carbon and really go after the UN Sustainable Development Goals and create a sustainable future for all of us. So in terms of standardization, as I mentioned, it's consensus based. It fully adheres to what's called the WTO principles. There are two equivalent processes for standards development in the IEEE. There's the individual method and there's the entity method. The only real difference between the two methods is who is considered a participant or who can vote, for instance. In the individual method, individual people like you and I are considered participants, and it's one vote per person. In the entity method, the entities like corporations, nonprofits, universities, government agencies, entities are considered the participants, and it's one vote per entity. I've actually seen both processes work really well. I participated in both processes. They have minor pros and cons, but it typically just depends on when you start a standard. When someone first starts the standard, they choose do they want to follow the individual method or the entity method. But either way, the participation is open to everyone. You do not have to be an individual member to participate in individual working groups. And likewise, entities do not have to be an entity member to participate in entity work groups. You do have to be members to eventually be able to vote and things like that. But if you just want to participate and see what's going on, it's free. And I think this is an important point to stress, because I'm hoping one of the takeaways you get from today's talk is that you might want to go get engaged in a standards development process. Maybe you look around on IEEE's website, you find that there's a standard that looks kind of interesting to you. Just know that you can participate without having to pay any money. It's free to participate. Right now is one of the best times to get started. It's sadly, one of the benefits, I guess, of COVID, if I can put it that way. I hate to say that COVID has any benefits, but a lot of the standards development has moved into online meetings. And so now it's free to participate. All you got to do is connect to a WebEx or a Zoom meeting, and you can sit there and listen. As opposed to before COVID, usually you would have to travel to these meetings, so there was some cost involved there. And so what I'm trying to say is now is an excellent time to really start to get involved and to see what's interesting and to learn how these work. Even if you just want to attend a few meetings and see how they work, I would certainly encourage you to do that, because as I said, now's one of the best times to try. Excuse me. As I mentioned, first off, you do not need to be a member to sit in the meetings and participate, but membership does have benefits. You can eventually gain voting rights, and members can also hold leadership positions. And so there is an individual membership for standards, and there's the entity or corporate membership for standards. And you may want to consider getting those memberships. And it's global membership, and it's open to all. There's no restrictions on who can become a member. But as I said, if you want to just check it out, you don't need to be a member. You can join and observe and participate without being a member. And then you may find that, oh, okay, I think it would be beneficial to be able to vote. Maybe I want to hold a leadership position, that sort of thing. So although IEEE SA, it's the Standards Association, they have a lot of other offerings that aren't just purely focused on the development of standards. There's kind of some adjacent areas that make a lot of sense for a group that develops standards to have. The first of First one of these I would highlight is conformity assessment and certification program. So once a standard has been created, you can optionally go on and create a testing and certification program. And this can be quite important for many standards. I know I work on standards that are related more to communications. So it's really good to have testing and certification to know, first off, that a device is compliant with the standard, but secondly, to know that you'll have that interoperability. I think the great example here that I often use that most people are familiar with is IEEE has a standard 802.11. So that's the standard for wireless communication, wireless local area networks. But then there's a certification program that's run by the Wi-Fi Alliance. And I think we're all familiar with Wi-Fi at this point. And now consumers can go and they see a product and it's called Wi-Fi. Well, really what that Wi-Fi logo tells you is that product has been tested and certified to be compliant with the 802.11 standard. So compliance and testing and certification become an important part for many standards after they're created. There's IEEE SA Open, which is an open source platform, collaboration platform. This is a relatively new offering from IEEE. So IEEE now hosts open source software. So if you have an open source project that you want to start, or if you want to participate in an open source project that's already out there, there's a great platform that IEEE hosts now to do that. And they use a lot of the tools that open source developers are already familiar with, things like GitLab. And then, but they also provide that structure around some of the rules and how you decide what changes go in or not. And then lastly, it gives a lot of visibility. You know, you can create your own open source thing and just release it on the web if you want to. But by being hosted in a platform like this, you get a lot more visibility, potentially even funding, things like that. IEEE offers alliance management services. I won't get into that too much, but essentially, if you want to start a consortium focused on say that creates its own standards, like a Wi-Fi alliance, they'll help you create that as well. There's the Industry Connections program. Industry Connections incubates new standards. So often people have ideas, but they're not quite sure about the standard yet and whether it should be standardized, or maybe there's a standard that's in development, but they want to do more marketing related activities or something. Industry Connections is a program where you can create a platform or create a group essentially to focus on, hey, I've got this idea. I don't know that it's ready for a standard yet. Let's get a lot of people together and talk it over. Or there is a standard in development, but we want to really think about how to develop the market. Let's get a group of people together. So that's what Industry Connections does. And there are a number of industry connection programs available now that you may want to be involved in. They typically focus on really cutting edge areas that may not even be ready for standardization. IEEE runs registries, may not necessarily be very exciting, but it's very important. So oftentimes standards will need a registry to have unique identifiers, things like that. And IEEE can manage that for you. If your standard needs, like, you know, this identifier goes to this company, this identifier goes to that company, they'll run that registry for you. And then lastly, IEEE does an excellent job of doing outreach and collaboration with other groups. There's a government engagement program where they engage. Typically, there'll be many governments have a bureau that's focused on standards, and those IEEE will do outreach to those agencies and educate them about IEEE standards, provide standards access for them, things like that. There's a standards fellowship program. It's a great way to get funding to really participate in standards programs. There's a standards adoption program so that countries can adopt IEEE standards. And then there's cooperative relationships with other standards bodies like ISO, IEC, ITU. And there's even the ability to do joint standards with other groups. So there's a whole, I mean, IEEE is just a very large organization. There's a whole lot of potential offerings here. And I hope what you'll see from this is that there's a lot of places you can get involved. I would certainly encourage you to just join a standards meeting and try it out and get involved there. But you might want to also think maybe testing and certification is something that's very much of interest to you, or maybe these industry connection programs where things are very cutting edge and you want to see what new ideas are developing, or even IEEE SA Open, if there's open source software you would like to contribute to or start. So the remainder of these slides go into more detail, and I'm happy to provide these slides to you. I'm not going to, I know I've talked quite a lot already about each one of these areas. And so I don't want to necessarily go into the details again, but just to highlight the first is the actual standards development itself, where you bring people together and they do bottom-up market-driven standards, often focused on interoperability or safety or things like that. You do not have to be a member to observe and participate. Membership is required if you want to be able to vote or gain leadership positions or things like that. The outcomes from standardization, I've touched on this a bit. It increases competition because now you have a level playing field. It increases customer confidence because if you have a product that's compliant with a standard, that customer knows that the product does what they want it to do. It provides a platform for innovation. It facilitates trade and economic growth, especially with an international standard. So, there's a level playing field. People in, where I live, the US, can export products to, say, India, and that they comply with a standard, and vice versa. India can export the products to the US. And we have kind of a level playing field there that we all know are compliant with a given standard. Performance aspects, you're able to specify performance aspects in those standards. And then sustainability, there's a big focus now on sustainability and making sure that we create standards focused on sustainability, but also with existing standards that we incorporate sustainability into those and think about ways to make technology more sustainable for the future, and in ways that that are more environmentally friendly, for instance. There we go. Next slide. I talked about the global cooperation, so I won't get into that very much, but I will highlight that there is a national standards adoption agreement with India. There's also within IEEE SA, there are these practices. If you really want to get engaged in any one of these practices, they're a good way to see what's going on in a given space. For instance, I'm involved in the energy practice. So at a high level, you can attend these practice meetings and really hear what different standards are under development in, say, the energy space. And it's a good way to get kind of an overview of what's going on in IEEE. I've already gone over the portfolio of programs. I don't think I need to do that again. There is one additional one on this slide, the Industry Affiliate Network, or what's often called IAN. This is a way to take specifications that have been developed by another organization and adopt them as IEEE standards. So say your company or you're a member of some kind of consortium, or your university has developed a specification that they've been using for a while, they think is wonderful, and they would like to see it be adopted as a standard. This industry affiliate network is a way of taking existing specifications from organizations and adopting them as IEEE standards through the standards adoption process. I touched on industry connections, just to highlight a few that are going on already. And as a reminder, industry connections is the pre-standardization activities. There's, for instance, there's a lot of activities. I think there's more than one, honestly, on blockchain. Blockchain is very interesting to people right now. Artificial intelligence, several on information security, sometimes focused on specific domains, online safety for children. And so these are all kind of cutting edge areas where in some ways, some of them have been around a while, like information security, but these groups, these industry connection groups really are focused on what needs to come next. What kind of pre-standards activities can we do, and maybe what standards are needed in the future. And so then they'll produce things like roadmaps for creation of standards, proposals for new standards. They'll hold workshops and events on their subject area, write white papers, technical specifications, things like that. It's a great way to get a group of people together to write a white paper, for instance. Maybe you're not ready to create a standard, and just a white paper on a specific topic. I mentioned that you do not need to be a member to get engaged in standards, but there is individual membership. So there's about 7,500 people have done that. And there's corporate or entity membership, which is now, last I saw, there's over 400 companies participating there. So you do need to be a member to be able to vote, to hold leadership positions, things like that. But if you're just getting started, you may not want to be a member yet, and you can still observe. I touched a lot on the testing and certification, so I can skip over that. Training and development. So this is another aspect that I should highlight. IEEE and IEEE Standards Association. I know you feel like you're hearing a lot about standards now, but there's an entire training and development program around getting into standards and understanding the culture, understanding the policies and procedures. It's called Standards University, if you want to look on the IEEE website. And there's a lot of good career development advice in there as well around developing those leadership skills and the tools for participating in standards. I mentioned the registries, just some examples of things that are registered. Ethernet MAC addresses, if you're aware of those, or various unique registration numbers. The Alliance Management Services, just some example. This is where, once again, that IEEE will set up a whole new consortium if that's desired. So say maybe your university wants to form a consortium with several other universities and create some sort of alliance to focus on some specific technology. IEEE would help you do that. They'll help you with all the legal aspects and how do you form something like that, put the policies in place and all. So some examples, there's the Wireless Power Consortium, the MIPI Alliance, things like that. And so just as an example, one of the specifications from one of these consortiums is the one you use for wireless charging of your mobile phones. So it's a great way to get a group of people together to form their own consortium to focus on a topic. IEEE SA Open, this is actually brand new. This is the open source platform that I mentioned. And there's already over 140 groups, and I think now we're over 1,000 users. So it's taken off so fast. I think it's gone faster and been more successful than any of us could have predicted. So if you're interested in doing, and I keep saying open source software, but they also do open source hardware as well, and even open data projects. So say you had training data for artificial intelligence. And so I'd very much encourage you to check out IEEE SA Open if that's of interest to you. I mentioned is a way to bring in specifications from other consortia. And then policy engagement. Once again, this is more detail about the engagement with governments around the world, like the government of India, as well as international organizations like UNESCO, UNICEF, the OECD, etc. Because there's often times that these policymakers have technology questions. And so this is a good way to contribute to those discussions in a very, politically neutral way, just purely from a technology perspective. So I have a couple slides here. I won't get into too much detail, but just so you're aware of how the standards development process works. So typically you have the ideation stage, right? A group of people have an idea. They say, hey, this would make a great standard. Maybe it's not ready yet, or maybe you need more time to talk about it. That's where that industry connections program comes in. But once the idea is ready, you put together a proposal for the standard. In IEEE terms, that's called a PAR, a project authorization request. And so this PAR is created and submitted. And if it's approved, there's a various levels of improvement, approval to make sure that the proper rules are followed, that it's got a good plan in place and that sort of thing. If it's approved, then you form a working group, and a working group gets together. Now it's almost all virtual meetings where folks meet relatively regularly to draft the standard. And there's so many working groups right now that are active, and you can go to the IEEE website and search for active projects, active standards projects. And this is where I would encourage you, just pick a few and attend and get a sense for how this works. And eventually, once the working group has a draft that's been created that they feel good about, they start to vote. So first the working group votes, and then there's a series of votes that occur after that. And then once those votes are successful and the draft is approved, we go into what's called publication and maintenance. So the standard's published, and then there's a maintenance cycle for how updates to the standard are handled. So here's a little more detail. I won't get into too much of this, but this shows you the timeline, or the process line, if you will, for how that development works, where you get the projects approved, the working group develops a draft, then you go through some ballots, then it's approved by the standards board and published. And then you can also develop tests. So move on to that ICAP program that I talked about, the testing and certification. But that's optional. You don't have to do that, and it may not even make sense for some standards. And then there's a process to go back and amend and revise standards and get an approval for that and continue the process around. So that's a quick, it may not have seemed quick, but that's actually a quick overview of what IEEE offers in terms of standards and adjacent activities. So to conclude, I do think engagement in standards provides a wide variety of benefits for your career. There's the technical knowledge, the knowledge you get from the market, and all of the people skills you develop, and then eventually even leadership experience and leadership skills that you develop. And obviously, I've shown you IEEE provides a variety of ways to get involved in standards and other activities. And my advice to you, it may seem intimidating, it may seem that there's a lot there, but unless you have a very specific goal and a very specific thing you want to work on, I would recommend just picking some that interest you and observing them and really kind of seeing how the process works and get some experience there and meet some people and build your career network. And then lastly, the connections that you make will prove beneficial throughout your career. And sometimes even lead to lasting friendships. I have friends that I'm fortunate enough to have now all over the globe that I would have never had the opportunity or chance to meet were it not for my engagement in standards. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your valuable insight regarding the importance of standard to career growth. So now I am requesting the audience to put their queries in the chat box, and also they can raise their hand in case their chat box is disabled.
Anurag, actually chat box is still on, and if anybody have query, then he or she also can raise hand.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. So all the audiences are requested to put their queries in the chat box, and apart from it, you can also raise your hands.
I think nobody is having query about the IEEE standards, but as a organizer, I will speak to, would like to speak to our honorable speaker, Dr. Robbie Simpson. And no doubt I am also working for the IEEE from 4 or 5 years with sincere dedications. But whatever you have explained about standards for the career growth, actually, I also was not aware about it. So in India, we have Institutional Innovation Council. So that is the by the Education Ministry, and you have shown us some data, and you have shown Israel, India, Australia, and they have some alliance on the standards also. So today I have clearly understand about the what actually the standard meaning. So thank you so much, our honorable speaker, Dr. Robbie, and we have recorded this video, and I will again listen this video, and I will see because in some slides I have seen there were a lot of information, but I have missed those slides. So but now I will see those slides, and indeed standardization topic is very relevant for us. Thank you, Dr. Robbie. But surely now I would like to invite our honorable director, Professor Dr. Bhavesh Kumar Chauhan, SRMCEM Lucknow, and sir is also the chair of Membership Development Committee of IEEE UP section. So, honorable director, sir, can you give us concluding remarks about this topic? Standardization for the career growth. Sir, now it is over to you, honorable director, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Khadam. I really appreciate as well as offer a sense of deep gratitude the way Dr. Robbie Simpson explained the things with an overview as well as with the right detailing, that how one can go about it, what is the process, what are the, and not only as a means but also for the career growth also. So it offers various possibilities. I have been a part of that a couple of years back, because there are a couple of meetings also that are organized. So and that standard involved at times, just to give you an idea, more than 200 members. In some of the standards, then the members of that drafting committee may go as high as couple of hundreds also. So it's a very voluminous process. And since the testing process is also very rigorous in certain standards, so I think it's a learning experience itself. And the kind of service that Robbie Simpson is doing, being a board of governors, and of course enlarging this concept to keep different members, volunteers spread across all over the globe to be really involved. I mean, rather I would say inspire, sensitize them, because awareness definitely enhances the pool. So in that context, his service is really commendable, and we really feel obliged that at Indian Forum also, through this program being organized under R10, he has given his time, his valuable time, despite his hectic schedule. And as Dr. Khadam very rightly pointed out, that we will go back to this, we will really share it with a wide publicity, so that the potential persons who can contribute or can propose certain standards can really do a service to the IEEE, which has a slogan itself, the technology for humanity. So it's a very important session, and I congratulate all the organizers also for having requested, sir. And I really thank, sir, you for giving your time, and of course your important inputs to sensitize all of us on in reference to the standardization process. Thank you
And
very much.
Honorable Director, sir, if you will give me permission, then I want to do one request from our honorable speaker.
Please, kindly go ahead.
Honorable Speaker, Dr. Robbie Simpson, we have listened you, and we have so much dynamic and intelligent and knowledgeable students in our college also, and they are part of the IEEE UP section. And I want to share with you, the SRMCM student branch is the world's largest student branch, you know. So actually, yes, world's largest student branch, where you are today delivering the lecture. We are the largest student branch of the world. And sir, it is due to the great initiative by our honorable director, sir, and we are executing the vision and mission of the IEEE. But I feel, because I have listened today about the standardization in the career growth and whatever knowledge you have, and frankly, I will say, I am the active IEEE volunteer, but I did not much aware about the standardization in the career growth. So we have a lot of students, and we have a lot of means knowledgeable students, and we want to connect them with the general electric. And if you will guide them, and if you will guide them in their project, then definitely the outcome you want to show to us, then, and we will help you. We will help you. And if in this side, if you and General Electric will help our students, then surely we will produce a dynamic volunteers for, and they will contribute in the nation, country, and all over the world at large. So it is my request to you. So I will send you a request. If yes, Professor Dr. Robinson, sir. Yes, now it is over to you. Please.
Wonderful. Well, first off, Dr. Chauhan and Dr. Kadim, thank you for the kind words and for the invitation. It has been an honor to speak to you all, and please do stay in touch. I would certainly like to share knowledge about GE and information about how about the careers we have available, both in India as well as globally, and how to incorporate your fine students and how we can best work together. So yes, please do contact me for more information there.
Yes, sir. And sir, you know, we have our international mentor, and he is our Honorable Sir John MacDonald. And Sir John MacDonald always, whenever we speak to Sir John MacDonald, sir, we need you. And Sir John MacDonald always say, yes, I'm coming. And they have interacted with our volunteers. And and today we have listened you due to the effort of the our mentor. So if you will, because you are so young, okay, and if you will guide us and guide our students along with our honorable mentor Sir John MacDonald, so definitely we can do much better for the society and at large for the world, sir.
Wonderful. I look forward to it.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And now, Anchor, it is over to you, please.
Dr. Vajpayee?
I think Anurag is facing any technical problem. So
Sir,
on
now I am
behalf,
audible.
yes,
Hello.
yes, you are completely audible. Yes, go ahead,
Okay,
Anurag.
okay, sir.
Yes.
Okay, sir. So thank you, Director, sir, Khadim, sir, and Dr. Robbie Simpson, sir. So thank you to all the participants for their patience and interactions in the event now. So I am requesting Engineer Sandhya Srivastava ma'am, Secretary, Membership Development Committee, Assistant Professor of Electrical Engineering Department, and IEEE Advisor, SRMCEM, Lucknow. Sandhya ma'am.
For
Thank you.
official vote of thanks. Yes.
Thank you, Anurag. Thank you very much. Good evening to today's guest of honor, from Speaker Honorable Dr. Robbie Simpson, System Architect, General Electrical USA, Honorable Director Sir, Dr. Bhavesh Kumar Chauhan, all respected HODs, faculties, and dear students. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose vote of thanks on this occasion. Famous says by Miss Tracy, finding your passion is the key to your success. I, on the behalf of all stakeholders and SRM family and MT committee members, extend a very heartily vote of thanks to our today's guest of honor, come speaker, Dr. Robbie, for giving an excellent coverage to importance and standard to career growth. We all inspired your great words, sir. Thank you so much for being with us today. I also wish to extend my gratitude to Honorable Professor Dr. Bhavesh Kumar Chauhan, sir, for providing encouragement and motivation always. I would also like to acknowledge our gratitude to HOD EEN department and convener of this event, respected Dr. Khadim Moin Siddiqui, sir, for their continuous support and guidance. I must mention my deep sense of appreciation to all HODs and faculty members for their presence. I also extend my thanks, dear students, and a special thanks to all organizing and MT committee members, especially Engineer Jati West, he is my colleague and a faculty coordinator too of this event, and students Amba Mishra, I mentioned some name here, Rishika Pandey, Umihani Fatima, Anurag Bajpayee, Anant Verma, Ankit Gupta, and all who work smartly and hardly for making this event successful. At the last but not the least, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Sandhya ma'am, for the vote of thanks. Now it is my request to all the participants, kindly switch on your video, kindly switch on your camera so we can take a combined photograph. Yes. Anand, you take photograph, please.
Yes.
Okay, Anand, you have done it.
Sir, done.
Good, good. And yes, thank you. Thank you, Anand. Now, I would like to invite our Honorable Director, Professor Dr. Bhavesh Kumar Chauhan, Chair, Membership Development Committee, and Chief Convener of this program for declaring this event closed, so we all can leave the platform. So, Honorable Director, sir, it is over to you, please.
Okay, with the kind permission of the guest speaker, I think we can now proceed with the closing of the event. Thank you and congratulations to all the organizing committee for this successful condition.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much for this guest speaker.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. So tomorrow we have another session. Our Honorable Jennifer Castelio ma'am is coming. So that event will start from 7 p.m. tomorrow, IST. So thank you so much all. Now we can leave the platform. Thank you so much.